Leviticus 23, the appointed feast days. The Lord said to Moses, Speak to the Israelites, tell them, Here are my appointed feast days. They are the appointed feast days of the Lord. Tell the people that they must come together for these sacred assemblies. The Sabbath day, that there are 6 days when you can work, but the 7th day is the day of Sabbath rest. You must rest on it. Come together on that sacred day. You must not do any work on it. No matter where you live, it is a Sabbath day to honor the Lord. Passover and unleavened bread. Here are the Lord's appointed feasts. Tell the people that they must come together for these sacred gatherings at their appointed times. The Lord's Passover begins when the sun goes down on the 14th day of the first month. The Lord's Feast of Unleavened Bread begins on the 15th day of that month. For 7 days, you must eat bread made without yeast. On the first day, you must come together for a special service. Do not do any regular work on that day. On each of the 7 days, bring food offering to the Lord. On the 7th day, come together for a special service. Do not do any regular work on that day. The first share of Israel's crops belong to the Lord. The Lord said to Moses, Speak to the Israelites, tell them, when you enter the land I am going to give you, bring an offering to the Lord, gather you crops, bring the first bundle of grain to the priest. He must lift up the grain and wave it in front of the Lord. Then the Lord will accept it from you. The priest must wave it on the day after the Sabbath. On the day he waves the grain for you, you must sacrifice a burnt offering to me. It must be a lamb that does not have any flaws. It must be a year old. You must bring it together with its grain offering. The grain offering must be 7 pounds of the finest flour. Mix it with olive oil. It is a good offering presented to the Lord. It has a pleasant smell. You must offer a drink offering along with the burnt offering. It must be a quart of wine. You must not eat any bread until the day you bring your offering to the Lord your God. You must not eat any cooked grain or any of your first grain until that time. This is the law that will last for all time to come. It applies no matter where you live. The Feast of Weeks, the day you brought the grain for the wave offering, was the day after the Sabbath. Count off 7 full weeks from that day. Count off 50 days up to the day after the Sabbath, 7th Sabbath. On that day, bring to the Lord an offering of your first grain. Bring 2 loaves of bread that are made with 7 pounds of the finest flour. They must be baked with yeast. Bring them to me as a wave offering from the first share of your crops. That applies no matter where you live. Together with the bread, bring 7 male rams. Each ram must be a year old. It must not have any flaws. Also bring 1 young bull and 2 rams. They will be a burnt offering to the Lord. They will be offered together with their grain offerings and drink offerings. They are food offerings. Their smell pleased the Lord. Then sacrifice 1 male goat for a sin offering. Also sacrifice 2 rams for a friendship offering. Each of the lamb must be a year old. The priest must lift up the 2 lambs and wave them in front of me as a wave offering. He must offer them together with the bread made out of the first share of your crops. They are sacred offering to the Lord that will be given to the priest. On the same day, tell the people that they must come together for a special worship service. They must not do any regular work. That is the law that will last for all time to come. It applies no matter where you live. Suppose you are gathering your crops, then do not harvest all the way to the edges of your field, and do not pick up the grain you missed. Leave some for the poor people and the outsiders who live among you. I am the Lord your God. The Feast of Trumpets. The Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, on the first day of the 7th month, you must have a day of Sabbath rest. It must be a special service announced with trumpet blast. Do not do any regular work on that day. Instead, bring a food offering to the Lord, the day when sin is paid for. The Lord spoke to Moses. He said, the 10th day of the 7th month is the day when sin is paid for. Come together for a special service. Do not eat any food. Bring a food offering to the Lord. Do not do any work on that day. It is the day when sin is paid for. On that day, your sin will be paid for in my sight. I am the Lord your God. Suppose you do eat food on that day, then you will be separated from your people. I will destroy anyone among your people who does any work on that day. You must not do any work at all. This is the law that will last for all time to come. It applies to no matter where you live. That day is the day Sabbath rest for you. You must rest on it. You must not eat anything on that day. You must follow the rules of the Sabbath rest. Follow them for the evening of the 9th day of the month until the following evening, the Feast of Booths. The Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, on the 15th day of the 7th month, the Lord Feast of Booths begins. It lasts for 7 days. On the first day, you must come together for a special service. Do not do any regular work on that day. On each of the 7 days, bring a food offering to the Lord. On the eighth day, come together for a special service. Bring a food offering to the Lord. The special service is the closing service. Do not do any regular work on that day. These are the Lord's appointed feasts. Tell the people that they must come together for these sacred assemblies. During those times, the people must bring food offerings to the Lord. They are burnt offerings and grain offerings. They are sacrifice and drink offerings. Each offering must be brought at its required time. The offerings are in addition to those of days of Sabbath rest. The offerings are also in addition to your gift and anything you have promised. They are also in addition to all the offerings you choose to give to the Lord. Begin with the 15th day of the 7th month. That is after you have gathered your crops. On that day, celebrate the Lord's Feast of Booths for 7 days. The first day is the day of rest. The 8th day is also day of rest. On the first day you must get branches from palms, willows, and other leafy trees. You must be filled with joy in front of the Lord your God for 7 days. Celebrate the Lord's Feast of Booths for 7 days each year. This is the law that will last for all time to come. Celebrate the feast in the 7th month. Live in booths for 7 days. All the Israelites must live in booths. Then your children after you will know that I made the Israelites live in booths. I made them do it after I brought them out of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So Moses announced to the Israelites the appointed feast of the Lord. Leviticus 24. Olive oil, bread, and incense. The Lord said to Moses, command the Israelites to bring you clear oil made from pressed olive. Use it to keep the lamps burning and giving light all the time. Aaron must take care of the lamps in front of the Lord from evening until morning all the time. This is the law that will last for all time to come. The lamps are outside the curtain in front of the tablet of the covenant law in the tent of the meeting. The lamps are the pure gold lamps standing in front of the Lord. They must be taken care of all the time. Get the finest flour and bake 12 loaves of bread. Use 7 pounds of flour for each loaf. Arrange them in 2 stacks. Put 6 loaves in each stack on the table made out of the pure gold. The table stands in front of the Lord. By each stack put some pure incense. It will remind you that all good things come from the Lord. Burn the incense in place of the bread. The incense is a good offering presented to the Lord. The bread must be set out in front of the Lord regularly. do it every Sabbath day. It will be Israel's duty to provide it all time to come. The bread belongs to Aaron and his sons. They must eat it in the holy area. It is a very holy part of their regular share of the food offerings presented to the Lord. A person who speaks evil is put to death. There was a man who had an Israelite mother. His father was born in Egypt. The man went out among the Israelites. A fight broke out in the camp between him and an Israelite. The son of the Israelite woman spoke evil things against the Lord by using curse. So the people brought him to the Moses. The name of the man's mother was Shelomith. She was the daughter of Dibri. Dibri was from the tribe of Dan. The people kept her son under guard until they could find out what the Lord wanted them to do. Then the Lord spoke to the Moses. He said, "Get the man who spoke evil things against the Lord. Take him outside the camp. All those who heard him say those things must place their hands on his head. Then the whole community must kill him by throwing stones at him. Say to the Israelites, anyone who cursed me will be held accountable. Anyone who speaks evil things against my name must be put to death. The whole community must kill them by throwing stones at them. It does not matter whether they are an outsider or an Israelite. When they speak evil things against my name, they must be put to death. Anyone who kills another human being must be put to death. Anyone who kills someone's animal must pay each owner. A life must be taken for a life. Suppose someone hurt their neighbor, then what they have done must be done to them. A bone must be broken for a bone. An eye must be put out for an eye. A tooth must be knocked out for a tooth. The one who has hurt his neighbor must be hurt in the same way. Whoever kills an animal must pay each owner. But if they kill a human being, they must be put to death. The same law applies whether they are an outsider or an Israelite. I am the Lord your God. Then Moses spoke to the Israelites. They got to the man who had spoken evil things against the Lord. They took him outside the camp. There they killed him by throwing stones at him. The Israelites did just as the Lord had commanded Moses. Leviticus 25. The Sabbath day, Sabbath year. The Lord spoke to Moses at Mount Sinai. He said, "Speak to the Israelites, tell them, you will enter the land I am going to give you. When you do, you must honor the Lord every 7th year by not farming the land that year. For 6 years plant your field, trim the branches in your vineyard, and gather your crops. But the 7th year must be a year of Sabbath rest for the land. The land must rest during it. It is a Sabbath year to honor the Lord. Do not plant your field. Do not trim the branches in your vineyards. Do not gather what grows without being planted. and do not gather the grapes from the vine. You have not taken care of it. The land must have a year of rest. Anything the land produces during the Sabbath year will be food for you. It will be for you and your male and female servants. Your hired workers will eat it. So will people who live with you for a while, and so will your livestock and the wild animals that are in your land. Anything the land produces can be eaten. The year of Jubilee. Count off 7 Sabbath years. Count off 7 times 7 years. Then 7 Sabbath years add up to a total of 49 years. Then 10th days of the 7th month is the day when sin is paid for. On that day, blow the trumpet all through your land. Set the 50th year apart. Announce freedom all over the land to everyone who lives there. The 5th year will be a year of jubilee for you. Each of you must return to your own family property, and each of you must return to your own tribe. The 5th year will be a year of jubilee for you. Do not plant anything, do not gather what grows without being planted, and do not gather the grapes from the vines. You have not taken care of it. It is a year of jubilee. It will be holy for you. Eat only what the field produces. In the year of jubilee, all of you must return to your own property. Suppose you sell land to any of your own people, or you buy land from them, then do not take advantage of each other. The price you pay must be based on the number of years since the last year of Jubilee. Here is how the price you charge must be decided. It must be based on the number of the year left for gathering crops before the next year of Jubilee. When there are many years left, you must raise the price. When there are only a few years left, you must lower the price. That is because what is really being sold to you is the number of crops the land will produce. Do not take advantages of each other. Instead, have respect for your God. I am Lord your God. Follow my rules. Be careful to obey my laws. Then you will live safely in the land. The land will produce its fruit. You will eat as much as you want, and you will live there in safety. Suppose you say, in the 7th years you will not plant anything or gather our crops. So what will we eat? I will send you great blessing in the 6th year. The land will produce enough for 3 years. While you plant during the 8th year, you will eat food from the old crop. You will continue to eat food from it until the crops from the 9th year are gathered. The land must not be sold without a way of getting it back. That is because it belongs to me. You are only outsider and stranger in my land. You must make sure that you can buy the land back. Then apply to all the land that belongs to you. Suppose one of your own people comes poor And suppose they have to sell some of their land, then their nearest relative must come and buy back what they have sold. But suppose they do not have anyone to buy it back for them, and suppose things go well for them and they earn enough money to buy it back themselves, then they must decide how much the crops have become worth since the time they sold the land. They must take that amount of the price the land was sold for. They must give the ones selling it back to them the money that is left. Then they can go back to their own property. But suppose they have earned enough money to pay them back, then the buyer they sold the land to will keep it until the year of Jubilee. At that time it will be returned to them. Then they can go back to their property. Suppose someone sells a house in the city that has a wall around it. Then all a full year after they sell it, they have the right to buy it back. But suppose they do not buy it back before the full year has passed, then the house in the walled city will continue to belong to the buyer and the buyer's children. It will not return to the seller in the year of Jubilee. But houses in villages that do not have walls around them must be treated like property outside the walled city. Those houses can be bought back at any time, and they must be returned in the year of Jubilee. The Levites always have the right to buy back their houses in the towns that belong to them. So their property among the Israelites can be bought back. The price to the house sold in any of their towns. Any house that is sold must be returned to its original owner in the year of Jubilee. That is because the houses of Levites will always belong to them. But the grasslands around their towns must never be sold. They will belong to them for all time to come. Suppose any of your own people become poor, and suppose they can't take care of themselves, then help them just as you would help an outsider or a stranger. In that way, the poor can continue to live among you. Do not charge them in interest of any kind instead. Instead, have respect for God, then those who have become poor can continue to live among you. If you lend them money, you must not charge them interest, and you must not sell them food for more than it cost you. I am the Lord your God. I brought you out of Egypt. I did it to give you to the land of Canaan. I wanted to be your God. Suppose any of your own people become poor, and suppose they sell themselves to you, then do not make them work as slaves. You must treat them like hired workers, or you must treat them like those living among you for a while. They must work for you until the year of Jubilee. Then their children must be set free. They will go back to their own tribes. They will go back to the property their people have always owned. The Israelites are my servants. I brought them out of Egypt, so they must not be sold as slaves. Show them pity when you rule over them. Have respect for God. You must get your male and female slaves for the nations that are around you. You can buy slaves for them. You can also buy as slaves some of the people living among you for a while. You can also buy members of their families born among you. They will become your property. You can leave them to your children as their share of your property. You can make them slaves for life. But when you rule over your own people, you must be kind to them. Suppose an outsider living among you for a while becomes rich. Then suppose any of your own people become poor. Then they sell themselves to the outsider living among you, or they sell themselves to a member of the outsider's family. Then they keep the right to buy themselves back after they have sold themselves. One of their relatives can buy them back. An uncle or cousin can buy them back after they have sold themselves. In fact, any relatives in their tribe can do it. Or suppose things go well for them, then they can buy themselves back. Then their buyer must count the number of years for the time of the sales up to the year of Jubilee. Then price for their freedom must be based on the amount paid to the hired man for that number of years. Suppose there are many years until the year of Jubilee, then for their freedom they must pay a larger share of price paid for them. But suppose there are only a few years left until the year of Jubilee, then they must count the number of years that are left. The payment for their freedom must be based on that number. They must be treated as workers hired for year to year. You must make sure that those they must work for are kind to them when they rule over them. Suppose they are not bought back in any of those ways, then they and their children must still be set free in the year of Jubilee. That's because the Israelites belong to me. They are my servant. I brought them out of Egypt. I am the Lord of your God.